So today's reading is by James Baldwin from Lifting Our Voices, number 186. For nothing is fixed, forever and forever and forever. It is not fixed. The earth is always shifting. The light is always changing. The sea does not cease to grind down rock. Generations do not cease to be born, and we are responsible to them because we are the only witnesses they have. The sea rises, the light fails, lovers cling to each other, and children cling to us. The moment we cease to hold each other, the moment we break faith with one another, the sea engulfs us and the light goes out.
For nothing is fixed, forever and forever and forever. It is not fixed. These are the years when we begin to realize this great truth. Nothing is fixed, not even the seasons, not even the climate. We live in a time of shifting sands and rising tides. The sea levels are rising and rising as the great Arctic and Antarctic ice shelves melt. So today we're facing that challenging reality of climate-forced displacement. Thousands and thousands of refugees are struggling as their homes, their communities disappear due to wildfires or floods or hurricanes or rising sea levels. Places all over the world are experiencing the long-lasting impact of climate change. The flooding does not fully recede. The risk of fire remains too high to rebuild. The power grid is too damaged to be repaired. There are island nations in the Pacific Ocean that will cease to exist in the next 30 years. Entire nations gone. Imagine if Lake Ontario's waters were to rise several feet. There would be no more Port Credit. Lakeshore Boulevard would be underwater boulevard. This is happening now to people all over the world. The earth is always shifting. The light is always changing. The sea does not cease to grind down rock. We have built our cities and highways on the premise that the earth does not shift, that waterways do not change course, that the weather patterns are known. But the earth's truth is change, and we're going to have to learn how to change and adapt to it. Humankind has disrupted the ecosystems, and we're living with the consequences. In the years to come, it may be too hot for people to live at the equator. They won't actually be able to survive. And billions of people call this area home. The climate crisis is a human crisis. As Unitarian Universalists, we say we are part of the interdependent web of life. We're all connected. All people have inherent worth and dignity. So while we're safe, Port Credit is not going to go underwater anytime soon. We are connected to those around the world who are losing their homes and communities. And just as we responded to the Syrian crisis by bringing families to a new life in Canada, we are asked to respond to this larger crisis. All the people matter. Generations do not cease to be born, and we are responsible to them because we are the only witnesses they have. We are responsible to them, and yet the world as a collective is failing the generations to come. We're not healing the earth fast enough. Right now, climate devastation is not a recognized reason for people seeking refuge, which means climate refugees cannot claim refugee status. They have no home to go back to and have no place to go towards. So we need new global policies and plans to help those people who are bearing the brunt of the climate crisis. And so our UU at UN, in partnership with other UU justice groups, is doing the work of advocating for these policies, supporting people in countries most vulnerable to climate destruction. Sea rises, the light falls. Lovers cling to each other and children cling to us. The UU at UN has released a statement of commitment in response to climate-forced displacement, and it reads in part, Black, Indigenous people of color, frontline and other oppressed and marginalized communities who have done the least to contribute to the climate crisis historically are facing the worst of its effects. Many people have been displaced from their homes, and millions more will follow in the decades ahead. This involuntary climate exile is a global human rights violation on a massive scale. Not only does it deprive millions of people of their rightful home, it also forces them to seek resettlement in a global community that has done little to ensure the safe and dignified reception of people seeking asylum, particularly migrants of color. Our eighth principle calls us to dismantle systems of oppression, and the lack of planning, the lack of caring for climate refugees is another part of that racism that we all live within. Makes people of color, people who live in poverty elsewhere in the world, less than the wealthy West. And it is true that it is our levels of consumption of gas and oil and plastic and cars and asphalt and phones and laptops and airplane travel that have caused most of the problem. We bear responsibility in the climate crisis. And as you say, we are all part of this fragile web of life. We are all in this together. The moment we cease to hold each other, the moment we break faith with one another, the sea engulfs us and the lights go out. We have a choice now. As people of the chalice, our religion calls us to not turn our backs, but to reach out our hands. The waters are rising, but our UU boat is large. There's always room for more, and we can navigate the rising tides together. As you can see, the climate crisis freaks me out, and I often feel very overwhelmed by it. At times, I feel helpless in my actions, despite my love for the planet and its people. And I have to remind myself, I've been a supporter of 350.org for years. I've joined in climate protests. I've been a supporter of the UU at UN office. I recycle, I reuse, I reduce. I try to live lightly with electric cars and a vegetarian diet. And none of this is enough. But I have to remind myself that neither is it insignificant. Whenever I go to the Brampton YMCA, I see this counter on the water fountain that measures how many bottles have been refilled. And it is in the thousands. And that is at just one small Brampton YMCA. These practical actions are not enough. They're never enough, but neither are they insignificant. They build and build on one another, those drops in the bucket that cause change. And all of those things are not the only things that we do in response to the climate crisis and the displacement of people. We're doing something when our heart hurts over the scope of human and animal suffering. We're still engaged if we're feeling it. We're doing something when we step beyond our limited experience and acknowledge that we can't know what it's like to lose everything. Not just home, but community and culture and history gone forever. And we are doing something when we interrupt a conversation to say, no human being is illegal. Or say, we're all settlers on this land. We are doing when we use the language of reverence and interdependence to talk about refugees and the climate crisis. None of this is enough, but neither is it insignificant. It all matters. Every piece, from a generous donation to a shared sorrow, to a thoughtful conversation, to a kind welcome to a newcomer. These things build up. They change things. Here at UCM, we have a tradition of welcoming families who've been displaced, most lately in helping at least a dozen families of Syrians settle into new lives here. And of course, the refugee process to get here is complex and arduous and takes far longer than it should. And arriving here, it's not always easy for families to adjust as they face racism and discrimination and work in education settings. I typed immigrants into my Twitter feed and regretted it yesterday, because immigrant blaming is on the rise. No doubt about it. It's here in Canada as well as in the United States. And that is just so ironic for me, considering that Canada and the United States were created precisely by everybody migrating from somewhere else. That it becomes so easy to keep what we have and think that we can't share. It's easy to fear what we don't know. It's easy to have a sense of scarcity instead of welcome. And it's hard to keep our minds open, and it takes work. Once, a long, long time ago, a group of people called Parsis had to flee their home in Persia and seek haven in a new land. And they were persecuted for following Prophet Zoroaster. And so they came to a part of India known as the Gujarat. And the Parsis went with their wisest priest to see the ruler, Jadai Rava, and asked permission to stay. And the Jadai Rava refuses, saying, "My land is like a glass of milk. It is full to the brim. There is no more room." So the Zoroastrian priest asks for a glass of milk and a spoonful of sugar. And the glass of milk is brought, filled to the brim. And the priest quietly pours in the sugar and says to the Jadai Rava, "If you take us into your land, my people will be like sugar, just a small spoonful, and we will make your kingdom sweeter." And at this, the Jadai Rava smiles and welcomes them to the land. And I encourage all of us to cultivate this attitude to all refugees and immigrants, to any stranger, to remember that newcomers make life sweeter. We need to hold on to this wisdom as we face an earth in crisis, as the global community struggles to manage the upheaval of climate-displaced people desperately seeking home. Nothing we do will be enough, and none of it will be insignificant. It's important to keep on caring, to speak our values aloud, to continue to help in ways large and small. The poem Devin shared this morning was written by James Baldwin. Baldwin was a gay Black man born in 1920s America, and he had to leave the United States to be safely and fully himself. There will always be displaced people, people having to leave countries or communities to be their true genders and orientations, people forced out of their homes by war, by persecution, and now there will be more, all forced to move due to the climate crisis. Our work is to keep mitigating the climate crisis, to keep the borders open, and remember that newcomers make life sweeter. For nothing is fixed. Forever and forever and forever, it is not fixed. The earth is always shifting, the light is always changing, the sea does not cease to ground down rock. Generations do not cease to be born, and we are responsible to them because we are the only witnesses they have. The sea rises, the light fails, lovers cling to each other, and children cling to us. The moment we cease to hold each other, the moment we break faith with one another, the sea engulfs us, and the light goes out. Let us face the rising tides together. Let us continue to hold all the people and keep the light of the chalice burning bright. So say we all.